All right, guys, we're going to talk a little bit now about the body paragraphs of your essay. So, before we discuss the body paragraphs, I want to take a little bit of time to review embedding quotes. So, a lot of this information comes from a book entitled They Say, I Say. I have it linked here in case you're curious about it. So, quoting someone else's words gives a tremendous amount of credibility or ethos to your essay, and it helps ensure that your essay is fair and accurate. So, in a sense, quotations function as a kind of proof of evidence, saying to the readers, look, I'm not just making this stuff up. She makes this claim here. It's in her exact words, so clearly I know what I'm talking about. Now, the main problem arises with quoting when writers assume that the quotations speak for themselves. So, because you, as the writer, because the meaning of a quotation is obvious to you, many writers assume that the meaning will also be obvious to the person reading your essay, when often it's not. Writers often make this mistake and they think their job is done when they've chosen a quotation and inserted it into their text, and then they draft an essay, slap in a few quotes, and whammo, they're done. But we call this, which I'll get to in just a moment, hit and run quotes. So before we begin, let's continue reviewing these embedded quotes. So, in a way, quotes are kind of like orphans. They're words that have been taken from the original context and they need to be integrated into their new textual surroundings, your essay. So there are two key ways to produce this sort of integration. First of all, you really need to choose your quotes wisely with an eye to how well they support that particular part of your text. And secondly, you need to remember to surround every quotation with a frame explaining whose words they are, what the quotation means, and how the quotation relates to your own text. So, quoting relevant passages, be careful not to select quotations just for the sake of demonstrating that you've read an author's work. You need to make sure that the quotes that you pick support your argument. Otherwise, the reader is going to be really confused. So, if you, as an aside, want to print your sources, let me know. I have your copier numbers. That might make it a little bit easier to find the relevant passages in your sources that you want to use. Now, I talked a little bit about hit and run quotes. These are kind of like car accidents in which the driver speeds away and avoids taking any and all responsibility for the dent in your fender or the smashed taillights. So here's an example. I took this from my own essay that I wrote, my example essay. So USA Facts shares data about internet access, period. And then we have this quote in yellow, but notice it's just dropped into the text. There's no lead up. There are none of my words to set up the quote. So, since I failed to introduce the quote adequately or explain why I find it worth quoting, readers are going to have a hard time understanding the significance of the information. So, you don't want to try and make the information speak for you. You want to use the information as evidence to support your position or your claim. So, it's important that you integrate the evidence that you're using with your own words. So, how do we correctly embed quotes? So, to adequately frame a quotation, you surround it with a quotation sandwich, with the statement introducing it serving as the top slice of the bread, and the explanation following it serving as the bottom slice. You can also use the acronym ICE: introduce, cite, and explain. So, the introductory or lead in claims should explain who's speaking and set up what the quotation says. The follow-up statement should explain why you consider the quotation to be important and what you take it to say. So in the next few slides, I want you to take a look at how I embedded the same quote from the last slide or a few slides back in my example essay, which I've linked here. Then take a look at some sentence stems that might help you set up your quotes using signal phrases and explaining your quotes. So here's how I did this differently. So you see in yellow the quote that appeared a few slides back. But here you can see how I set it up. So when school buildings closed in March of 2020, the first obstacle to online learning that had to be addressed was getting devices into the hands of students because not all students have access to technology at home. This is actually my topic sentence for my first body paragraph. Based on surveys conducted in September 2020, there's my context, 73% of households with children always had access to internet for online learning, and 17% had access most of the time. An additional 7%, accounting for 3.7 million households, had internet available sometimes, rarely, or never. And then in the green, you see my commentary, in which I explain the relevance of the evidence that I just cited. So here's my context and my signal phrase. Here's the evidence that I'm citing, my concrete details here, and then here is my commentary in green. This data is significant because it captures student access to the internet 6 months after the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, which means that schools and communities had a significant amount of time to provide internet access to students' homes. Without access to the internet, students have no reliable access to learning materials other than photocopied packets and outdated textbooks, and they certainly do not have access to quality teacher instruction, which requires a device and internet connection. So one more time, here's my introduce, cite with my parenthetical citation, and explain. So here are a few sentence stems that you can use as you're getting more comfortable with this. So these are some stems for introducing quotes. According to X, so that might be an author's name, or if you don't have an author's name, it might be the title of a website. And then here's some stems for explaining what you have cited. So in making this comment, X urges us to, then you would finish it. And if you like this, here's some more templates. I'm going to click on it really fast. Look at all these tabs I have open. All right, so these are all templates from that source, They Say, I Say, that I was talking about. So here are just some stems that you can use to help you incorporate evidence in your essay. All right, so, okay. Introducing your introduce your evidence, quoting or paraphrasing, by giving a little bit of context, as we've established. So think about how you want to use the information. So are you trying to establish ethos, pathos, or logos? How can you set up your evidence to do this? And I have some examples here. So remember, ethos is credibility. So in this signal phrase, when I provide context, I emphasize this writer and how she's a Harvard professor and a published author to establish ethos or credibility. This one is logos, and so I talk about USA Facts, which is the source that I cited in my example essay. I talk about data. And then pathos. Remember, pathos is all based on emotion. And so I use language that's very loaded. The real toll that online learning has had on children. We have words like stuck, perpetual Zoom school, crying a lot. Is it confusing? So this is a very emotional quote. Notice too that this quote looks a little bit, the third one, the pathos quotes, looks a little bit different than the other two. That's because this is a really long quote. So anything that it's over 4 lines, you want to block, which means you separate it from the signal phrase and you indent it 10 spaces or 2 tabs. All right, so this is called a Schaefer model paragraph. So this is a formula that will help you if you get stuck writing your body paragraphs. So you start with your topic sentence, and this is based on the reason why from your argumentative essay graphic organizer. You turn that reason why into a statement, and then you add a concrete detail. So you transition, you provide some context, and transition into a specific detail or fact, i.e. a quote or paraphrase. Then you provide commentary. You write a sentence about your concrete detail, and then you write another sentence about your concrete detail. So we have 2 sentences of commentary. And then you transition into your second example, your second concrete detail, whether it be a quote or I wrote commentary. I need to change that to paraphrase. And then you provide a couple sentences of commentary and then your concluding sentence. So this is your last sentence, and you wrap up your topic and connect to your position or stance. I have a few little typos going on here that I'm going to have to correct. So this also gives you an opportunity to transition into the next topic. All right, so you can see how I did this in my example essay. So I'm not going to, I'll pull this up so that you can see it, but I'm not going to read it out loud. You have the link here so you can go to it and read it on your own. Just a couple of things that I want to point out, though, is that as you'll see in my example, you can have more than 8 sentences. Just make sure you're staying on topic. And you want to repeat this process until you've gone through all of your reasons why. So here's my example. And I have some commentary that's going to pop up here on the right. So I have my intro paragraph, and there's a separate video that goes over that. My 3 reasons why. So you see my first body paragraph is based on my first reason why. My second will be on my second, third on the third. And then you can see what I quoted in the presentation. So this is what I already went into. And then here you can see me going into my second concrete detail. Here, I'm going into my second concrete detail. You see that I have a block quote here because it's longer than 4 lines. And here you can see the commentary on my second concrete detail.